Once you stop holding on, life starts to flow again. Not because the wind's calm, but because you unclench your grip on the storm. You've been holding on so tightly to outcomes, to identities, to people, to plans you didn't realize you were suffocating your own becoming. Control became your fortress. But within its walls, you forgot what freedom feels like. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts we hide, resist, and fear, only to have them rule us from behind the mask. Holding on to what's no longer yours. Old roles, relationships, belief systems, identities become psychic bondage. It blocks flow, and when flow stops, you crack. That's syphoria. A spiritual exhaustion, not because life is harsh, but because you've been financing something that belongs in the past. Mindset shifts when you stop defending the familiar and open to the unknown. Belief deepens when you stop performing for others and start honoring your own truth. Clarity arrives when you unclench, not when you force. Vision emerges as the ego relaxes. Purpose becomes living your essence, not building someone else's ideal. Discipline turns into devotion, not domination. Action becomes art, not armor. Once you stop holding on relationships that looped, obligations that dried you up, stories you repeated like sacred scrolls, they begin to dissolve. Those that remain no effort required start to resonate. You move from chasing life to listening to its rhythm. The breath centers again. The mind softens. And beneath the rubble of control, revelation rises. Letting go isn't passive. It's radical strength. It's choosing presence over approval. It's recalibrating your energy to yourself, not to fear or frenzy or crowds. It means saying no to what drains, and yes to what frees, not in reaction, but in recognition. The paradox is glorious. The more you release, the more life reclaims you. Doors open, paths clear. People arrive who vibrate at your emerging frequency. Ideas flow, prayers respond. The weight glides off your shoulders, and the only thing inside you no longer scratching to survive is rest. Gratitude deepens, not for what you got, but for what you didn't have to prove. Adaptability follows not to survive crisis, but to welcome transformation. Resilience doesn't stiffen you, it softens you into steadiness. Once you stop holding on, learning becomes simple. You begin to listen. Failure isn't final, it's filtration. Gratitude doesn't chase perk, it lifts humility. Action comes not from fear, but from faithful alignment. And suddenly, the world stops feeling harsh, because you're no longer holding on to the pain, the narrative, the compulsion to fix. You're holding space for flow to return. So stand here, exhale, unclench, release the promise of needing to prove you're worthy. Release the habit of gripping your future like a rigid script. Release the ritual of striving for what the soul doesn't need to earn. Because when you do, life begins to deliver you to yourself. It drops you into rooms not of your making, but of your truth. It offers moments that don't demand you perform, but allow you to breathe. It rescues your essence from the noise you built in trying to be safe. And you begin to remember, you didn't come here to carry the past. You came to become emerging. You didn't come to fight the current. You came to flow with it. You didn't come to uphold old versions of yourself. You came to step into your newness. And life finally breathes again. Not because it works on your terms, because it's no longer blocked by them. So let go, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, not to disappear, but to appear more clearly, not to escape fear, but to return to peace. And once you do, watch what happens. Your heart unclenches, your spirit remembers, your path aligns, your purpose returns, and the quiet miracle of life flows toward you again. It flows not in the form of grand applause, but in subtle certainties, not in lightning strikes of revelation, but in the steady rhythm of inner knowing. You wake up, and the world feels less loud, not because it changed, but because you did. Because you stopped holding on to the noise inside you. You stopped feeding the narrative that you must always strive, always earn, always be more. And in that silence, something ancient awakens. Something that was buried beneath your need to be seen. Something that was ignored while you played the role of who they expected you to be. That something is you, the unforced you, the unbeholden you, the unburdened you, the one who no longer asks, am I doing enough? But instead lives from the clarity of, is this aligned with who I truly am? The one who knows that when you move from truth, there's no need to rush, because everything that's yours is already on its way. You don't have to grip. You don't have to grasp. You just have to stay open, stay present, stay clear. And yes, there will be fear. Letting go always invites it, because your ego was built to grip, to label, to categorize, to predict. But your soul was built to flow, to rise, to move freely through seasons, through endings, through rebirths, to grow not by accumulating, but by shedding. And when you live from soul instead of survival, you don't need guarantees. You don't need permission. You only need alignment. Alignment with your peace, your truth, your energy, your frequency. And as you let go of timelines, of expectations, of identities that no longer fit you, start to feel it. The return of clarity, of sovereignty, of a rhythm that doesn't exhaust you but sustains you. You begin to act from presence, not pressure. You speak from essence, not ego. You build not to impress but to express. And your whole life becomes a transmission, a message that whispers, I no longer chase, I choose. I no longer cling, I create. I no longer hold, I allow. This is what it means to truly live. Not to force your way into places where you were never meant to fit, but to rise from within so wholly, so unmistakably, that life reconfigures around your authenticity. And the people who couldn't meet you where you were, they fall away. Not because you judged them, but because you stopped dimming to stay beside them. The opportunities that required your exhaustion, they dissolve. Not because you failed, but because your peace raised your standard. And everything you thought you had to earn, it begins to arrive effortlessly because you finally aligned with a version of you that could receive it. That's the quiet power of surrender. It doesn't roar. It resonates. It doesn't conquer. It calls back. And the life that was always meant for you, the one built on flow, not force, is now unfolding in your hands. Because you stopped gripping the life you thought you needed and made room for the one you were born to live. The one you were born to live doesn't demand exhaustion. It demands truth. It doesn't ask for sacrifice of soul. It asks for presence of self. And now, because you let go, you're no longer standing at the edge of your life hoping to be chosen by it. You're walking inward, fully, boldly, unapologetically claiming what's already yours. Not because you chased it, but because you cleared the way for it. Because the truth is, life was never against you. It was just waiting for you to stop being against yourself, to stop arguing with your own intuition, to stop negotiating with your worth, to stop asking the world for what you were meant to give yourself. That's what letting go unlocks. The unshakable reality that you are not here to be perfect. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to carry the expectations of 1,000 other people on your shoulders. You are here to be free, to be wild in your integrity, fierce in your love, silent in your wisdom, and unstoppable in your clarity. Because when you stop holding on, what begins to flow through you is not weakness, it's creative fire. A fire that doesn't burn you out. It burns through the illusions, through the masks, through the noise, until all that's left is a self so true, so clear, so real, that even your past can't recognize you. And that's the point. You're not here to be recognizable. You're here to be remembered by yourself, by your soul, by the version of you that's been waiting not for answers, but for your surrender. Not for safety, but for your leap. Not for perfection, but for presence. And now you're here, breathing deeper, moving softer, saying clearer. and feeling finally that sacred, impossible thing begin to rise inside you, wholeness, not as an idea, not as a goal, but as a state of being. Because now you know wholeness doesn't come from adding more. It comes from releasing everything that isn't you and what flows in to replace it. Grace, power, alignment, stillness so loud it silences doubt. Conviction so grounded it scares your old fears into silence. Joy so quiet it no longer needs to be proved, posted, or paraded. It just island, like you, here, whole, home, and all because you finally let go. And now everything moves with you, not against you. Not because the world has changed, but because your relationship to it has. You're no longer walking upstream, dragging your soul through rivers of resistance. You're gliding not from ease, but from alignment. You're not lighter because life got easier. You're lighter because you're not carrying what's not yours anymore. No borrowed expectations, no recycled wounds, no second-hand dreams passed down through silence and shame. You're carrying only what is essential, only what is true. And in this simplicity, you begin to discover a different kind of power. Not the kind that postures or projects, but the kind that persists. It doesn't yell. It radiates. It doesn't dominate. It invites. It doesn't demand attention. It commands presence. This is the quiet power of someone who no longer needs to hold on to their worth, because they've become it. This is the unshakable grace of someone who has nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to grip. And now, ironically, divinely, everything begins to return. The energy you thought you lost, the joy you buried beneath achievement, the love you withheld from yourself, the clarity that once felt so far away, it comes naturally, effortlessly, because it was never gone. It was just waiting for space. And when you stop filling that space with fear, with clutter, with control, what enters is not chaos. What enters is truth. The truth of your being, the rhythm of your soul, the map of your purpose written into every breath, every step, every whisper of yes to the unknown. This is the moment, the shift, the arrival, where you stop trying to get your life together and let life gather itself through you. No force, no panic, no tight grip, only flow, only a deeper trust, a clearer voice, a softer presence, a stronger root, because you now know. The moment you stopped holding on was the moment life remembered where to find you. And it did. And it will, over and over again. Over and over again. Life finds its way back to you, not because you ran after it, but because you stood still long enough to become magnetic. No longer broadcasting desperation, but transmitting truth. No longer broadcasting confusion, but radiating clarity. And people feel it. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. The way you walk without rushing. The way you speak without defending. The way you choose silence when noise is expected. The way you glow not from approval, but from alignment. Because this is what happens when you let go of what dims you. Your light no longer asks permission to shine. It just does. Softly, powerfully, unapologetically. And the world, in its chaos, may try to pull you back into old habits, old roles, old versions of you that no longer exist. But you won't bend the way you used to. You won't shrink the way you once did. You won't silence yourself for comfort or betray yourself for peace. Because now you know any peace that costs you your truth is a lie wearing perfume. You don't need it. You're done with borrowed belonging. Done with contorting to fit into cages you were born to burn. Done with chasing what your soul doesn't respect. Because now you've seen what happens when you stop holding on. You felt the flow. And once you taste that kind of freedom, once you move from that kind of alignment, you can't go back. You won't go back. You'd rather lose everything false than keep even one thing that delays your becoming. That is the level of clarity you walk in now. That is the frequency that shifts every room you enter. And you don't do it for applause. You don't do it for power. You do it because you finally remembered. You are not here to survive a life of tension. You are here to live a life of truth, a life that moves with you, a life that breathes with you, a life that responds to you, because now you're not fighting the current. You are the current, moving through the world not to prove, not to please, not to perform, but to flow naturally, powerfully, fully. And the moment you let go, you stepped into everything that was waiting, not outside of you, inside. And it will never leave again, because you're not holding on anymore. You're home. You're home in a way that doesn't depend on place, or people, or praise. You are home because you've returned to the deepest truth. You never had to earn belonging. You only had to stop abandoning yourself. And that's what letting go really does. It's not just the release of circumstances, it's the reclamation of self. It's peeling away everything they taught you to be, so you can stand in everything you already are. And now you no longer ask life, what should I be doing? You ask, what am I already becoming? You no longer ask others, how do I fit in? You ask yourself, where do I feel most me? And when the mind whispers, but what if it all falls apart again? You answer, then I will rise again, more aligned, more free, more whole. Because you trust now, not blindly, not naively, but rootedly. You trust the silence between seasons. You trust the spaces where nothing makes sense. You trust the unraveling that precedes the rise. Because you remember the moment you stop gripping, what's real begins to gather. Not in chaos, in coherence, not in haste, in harmony, not from effort, from energy. That's the shift that changes everything. You stop striving to make things happen and start aligning to let things arrive. You stop forcing clarity and start living into it. You stop chasing certainty and start dancing with mystery. And in that dance, you are not powerless. You are powerful in the most profound way, because you've dropped every illusion that told you you had to be something other than yourself to be worthy. You are not your productivity. You are not your perfection. You are not your pace. You are the presence beneath it all. The presence that says, I let go of the version of me they created, and I remember the version of me I was born to be. And that version doesn't ask for permission, doesn't apologize for her power, doesn't need to be held together by force, because she's been set free by faith. And now, life flows not around her, not past her, but through her, effortless, eternal, unstoppable, because once you stop holding on, you become everything you were holding back. Everything you were holding back. Your voice, your fire, your depth, your joy, it rises. Without shame, without explanation, without resistance. And people may not recognize you. They may not understand how someone who once begged for breadcrumbs now walks like a sovereign storm. They may wonder how the one who once drowned in doubt now moves with the steadiness of someone who knows who they are, knows what they carry, knows that their energy is no longer available for distortion. Because when you let go, you don't just reclaim yourself, you reclaim your standards. The conversations you once tolerated, now you walk away mid-sentence without guilt, without apology. The cycles you once repeated, now they collapse in your absence because you no longer participate in your own suffering. You no longer chase closure from those who profit from your confusion. You no longer perform empathy for those who mock your pain. You no longer explain your boundaries to those who benefit from your lack of them. Why? Because you stopped holding on to the illusion that peace is found through control. And you started living the truth that peace is what remains when control dissolves. This is the liberation you never knew you needed. The untangling, the unlearning, the unraveling of every version of you that was trained to survive by shrinking. And what emerges? A force so anchored in truth, so fluent in alignment, so radiant in purpose that nothing artificial can stand beside it without crumbling. Not relationships, not routines, not rows. You become the recalibration, not just for yourself, but for everything around you. Because when one person lets go, they don't just heal their own life, they become a living invitation for others to do the same. To trust, to soften, to remember, to release, to return. And so here you are, not at the end of a journey, but at the beginning of a different one where the path is not built by strategy, but by surrender, one where success is not measured in metrics, but in meaning, one where life does not need to be gripped, but welcomed. And every step you take from here, every word you speak, every breath you draw, every choice you make, will echo from a place far beyond control. It will echo from freedom, the freedom that was always yours, the freedom that waited behind every clenched fist, every forced timeline, every story of not enough, the freedom that found you the moment you let go and chose to flow. And chose to flow not as a luxury, but as a sacred birthright, not because everything was easy, but because you stopped making resistance your religion. You stopped praying to pressure, stopped sacrificing your soul on the altar of expectations, stopped mistaking urgency for purpose. And in that stillness, where force fell silent, what emerged was real. It didn't announce itself with fireworks. It didn't come with a manual. It came as breath, as presence, as power that no longer needed performance. And now, nothing about you is striving to be seen, because you've seen yourself deeply, unflinchingly, compassionately. You faced the fear behind your holding on, and you didn't run from it. You walked through it. You held your ground while it screamed. You exhaled when it tried to own you. And in doing so, you broke the spell. You shattered the lie that said safety is found in control. Because now you've lived the truth. Safety is found in self-return, in coming home to what is steady inside you when everything outside of you spins, in anchoring into your knowing when every voice around you says doubt, in protecting your peace like sacred flame when the world demands your energy. And as you walk forward now, you don't just move, you transmit. Not a message of perfection, not a blueprint of control, but a frequency of flow, a frequency that ripples without effort, that heals without words, that transforms without announcement. Because you are no longer holding back, you are no longer holding on. You are no longer trying to force life into the shape of your fear. You're letting it shape you into something unrecognizable to the version of yourself that once begged for scraps. And what you become is not just free. It is freedom itself, not tied to form, not tied to outcome, not tied to who you were when you first began, but reborn in rhythm, in resonance, in realness. So now, when people ask you, how did it happen? How did everything start to change? You'll say nothing. You'll smile, because they wouldn't understand that it wasn't something you did. It was something you undid. A knot you finally stopped tightening. A mask you finally stopped adjusting. A weight you finally stopped carrying. And in that holy exhale, in that moment of sacred release, everything you were seeking flowed back in, exactly as it was always meant to. So let this be your final truth. Not a destination, not a conclusion, but a remembrance that the moment you let go, the moment you finally loosened your grip on who you thought you had to be, the moment you released the timelines, the tension, the tightness in your chest, life began to flow again, not around you, through you. And you realized you were never stuck. You were never broken. You were never behind. You were simply holding on too tightly to what was already fading. And when you finally let it fall, what rose was you? The you who moves without needing to explain. The you who speaks without needing to defend. The you who loves without needing to control. The you who exists without needing to prove. And that version of you isn't exhausted, isn't panicked, isn't desperate. That version is powerful in a way the world cannot measure, unshakable in a way the noise cannot touch, free in a way that only surrender can create. Because now you know, once you stop holding on, once you release the illusion of control, once you allow life to meet you, not on your terms, but on truths, you don't just live differently. You become different. You become light. You become space. You become the signal that calls what's meant for you home. And nothing will ever flow the same again. Because now, you are the flow.